Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our channel, we are mental health through pop culture, and we are joined today by Mr. Creep star Thomas Burke. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for bringing me on.
So I come across Mr. Creep, which you were involved with, and some of your other movies. Really, it's kind of funny. We were just talking about before recording. I came across Ghosts of Hiroshima, which is how I started talking with you. And
Nice.
yeah, that's a pretty good found footage movie. It was interesting in its own rights, and the way
Oh,
it was done as a video blogger instead of like the normal found footage, like you see where they're investigating something, or hey, we're gonna go check this out. It was, I'm doing a video blog and shit hits the fan.
yeah. You're right. It got a little intricate because typically with like found footage, part of the intimacy of the storyline is that it's all sort of happening in real time. But, oftentimes when you delve found footage into like let's say the mockumentary route, you're kind of able to mess with time a little bit. And so I would say like the challenging thing about working on Ghosts of Hiroshima was that I basically was editing it for almost a whole year, which I'm not really used to. Typically it takes just a couple of months to edit a feature from, start to finish. But basically what we were doing was we were trying to insert found footage within the found footage. So a lot of like the movie needed to be shot before other parts of the movie. And so I was sort of editing it in real time, if you will.
Right. And you've done, let's see, you've been voiceover work, editor. I believe you've been co-director, director. What all
Hmm.
credits do you have to your name? And I know a lot of it has involved found footage at this point.
A lot of it is found footage. I don't know the number, I don't even know the number of things that I'm working on right now. But I have some really great friends and colleagues that we're all kind of there for each other. But yeah, so I do acting. I just got off of a feature with the director of Malibu Horror Story. We did a American folk horror film. I can't really talk too much about it, but
Right.
that's going to be coming out pretty soon here. And then uh, I also do a lot of video editing. So Ghosts of Hiroshima, A Town Full of Ghosts. I sort of have always worked as an editor by day, so that's what's always felt like really natural to me. But for about 10 or 15 years now, I've been studying filmmaking, and that's sort of what got me more interested in like directing and producing and even like first assistant directing as well, like kind of dealing with the whole scheduling and safety protocols on set, as well as just like the whole communication between departments.
So a lot of the
Uh,
found, go ahead.
Mark, let me jump in here real quick.
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
curious. So you mentioned you like that you mostly stick to the found footage subgenre. Is that because of like a passion for the subgenre, or is that more or less it just kind of being more budget friendly when it comes to the
Mhm.
DIY horror?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely coming from a passion place, because I can remember some of the first found footage movies I had watched, and a lot of people's, as was mine, was the Blair Witch Project. And I remember I was at like a high school sleepover, and everyone there had already seen the movie except for me, and so they kind of made a little pact together to convince me that the film was real. And they all like go to bed like halfway through the movie, and so I'm watching this thing laser focused in, like, holy crap, this is like a real paranormal footage happening, on, or so to speak. And it really freaked me out. But then fairly quickly, when I realized that that is what found footage is, kind of delivering your narrative as real when it's more so docufiction, if you will. But that really got me interested. And then flash forward a couple years later, when pictures like As Above, So Below came out, or Chronicle, you started getting to see what found footage was capable of at like a supreme budget, like something, I around 20 plus $1 million. With that kind of money, then you're really able to take that filmmaking style and create some new things with it. So I started getting really interested in just all types of found footage, from screen life genre to mockumentary to analog horror. And I think what I like the most is Japanese found footage horror. But I would say in the last 2 years now, I've managed the found footage critic database and website, where I've added maybe 1,000 found footage entries to that. So I just love I love diving deep, and I love finding rare films in the hopes that maybe, and most of these rare films tend to be foreign films, films like in Japan, let's say, that just don't sell over here to the States, or their streamers don't, allow us to watch it from where we're at. It's kind of my hopes to like introduce some of these films to the West in hopes that maybe Japanese distributors, or others for that matter. There's a lot of like found footage movies in Turkey, for example, and Spain. Just kind of like spreading the found footage love and seeing if maybe, there's a way we can sort of like coexist in a way, not necessarily work together, right? But like one thing that found footage doesn't have is like a universal term. Like found footage is what we call it in English, but in Spanish it's I'm gonna botch this one. Metraje encantado, camera en mano, and in Japanese I couldn't even pronounce it, but there's all these different sort of like keywords, you know what I mean? Like that different cultures in different countries refer to found footage. And so there's like this unintentional barrier that's sort of preventing us from like seeing a bunch of these other really great found footage films out there, because we don't know how to search for it.
It's interesting.
Are there any, like I've seen, was it Noroi? I think it's called, from Japan.
Yeah, Koji
Um,
Shiraishi. He's my favorite director.
yeah, I love a lot of the Asian horror in general. It's a different style that builds on the atmosphere of their superstitions and beliefs and the culture, and you can get some really creepy stuff. And Noroi was really good, and I believe that's actually on Shutter right now.
Yeah,
Um,
phenomenal.
are there any other like found footage you'd somebody that might be interested or on the fence about about the genre, that you'd be like, hey, check these out?
Yeah, I guess it all depends on the person. Like if they're into something that's more studio made, I would definitely recommend like Chronicle, As Above So Below, or um let's see, Phoenix Forgotten. But then there's also these, like, the flip side of that is, some of these found footage films are more like character studies on one person. A lot of the times you don't even need like a full ensemble cast to do your found footage film. You see a lot of these filmmakers taking their camera, pointing it right at themselves, and they're like the crux of making a found footage film. Essentially one person could could theoretically make it from conception to completion. So that's a really hard thing to do, and respect to anybody who tries it. Um, However, there's just so much that goes into sort of like being that character study, or being that solo character in a narrative, where you have to, not only um, prove your likability or your likableness, you have to kind of maintain that throughout the whole picture, and that's just a challenging thing to do. So I would say, on the flip side of your question, sorry I trailed off a little bit, I would just say that like there are actually some really good performers out there that just do these like kind of one-man band films. Like one of my favorites is the Blackwell Ghost franchise. It's
Oh,
this
those are fantastic. I've seen like three or four of them. I think they just released number 7 or 8.
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. They just released 7. That's so awesome that you like that too. I think Turner Clay is like one of the best found footage filmmakers out there, and he's shooting it all himself. He's acting in all of it himself, and it's kind of hard to explain, but like there's a catharsis that goes into like authenticity, or in order to sort of like in order to like play fiction, you still have to give off a certain authenticity in like what you're doing, you believe in, and Turner Clay does a really good job at sort of exhibiting like that on screen.
Yeah, Blackwell Ghost. If you haven't seen it, Josh, it comes across as a paranormal investigation almost. He doesn't believe in it, but he's heard that this is happening at this location. So like him and his wife rent this beach house out for like a month or something like that. And it kind of plays out very similar, like a paranormal activity or something like that, but nobody's getting possessed. They're just dealing with a big haunting. And the Blackwell ghosts are fantastic found footage.
Yeah, and it's strange in a lot of ways because there is really no um there's never like any insight into what the method behind the madness is with him, because he tends to not do interviews. I think that's probably because he's just cranking out all these movies that totally kick ass, but and as he should, right? But there isn't a lot of transparent, like without spoiling anything, when you get into like parts 5, 6, and 7, the ones that you haven't seen, that's when we start getting meta and we're like wondering what's real and what's not. At first we're like, okay, this is like a docu-fiction type of like film. And then as we get like more into the franchise, it starts to affect him in his like own personal way, both like external forces as well as like family, like ties and like things like that. Like it's just really strange how some of this has unfolded, that there are a lot of people with a lot of questions. However, I think that's part of the magic that he's trying to build. And I would say totally like, respect to him for all the choices that he's making while he's doing this. But it's just nobody else is really doing that right now.
Yeah, it's presented in a manner that's different than most of that style movie. Like Paranormal Activity, it's got its feel. It was only like two people the entire movie, with a couple little guests showing up, and super low budget on a camcorder, very similar to the Blair Witch. But it still kind of had that Hollywood feel to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where uh Blackwell Ghost didn't.
That's
It doesn't have that feel.
you're right. And I think the main reason is that both Paranormal Activity and Blair Witch Project were like most well known for their marketing strategies. They were able to put millions and millions of dollars into just promoting the film. And one thing that the Blair Witch did, which I think is absolutely genius, is they made like 4 or 5 feature mockumentaries that all tied into the Blair Witch, that they played, on college campuses as well as, wherever else they distributed it, all around the time of the releasing. So, they had the website, which had like a really, I never visited. I was really young in the year, 1999. But, I've just done my research, and there's like, there was a really cool website that was getting updated frequently. And like, they had to like really, not give away too much, but also give away enough to sort of be like, okay, this is like potentially real. And that was what was really freaking people out. And then it just like spread like wildfire. I didn't really look too much into what Paranormal Activity did, but like, I think a lot of people remember, at least when those commercials were coming out for the first time, it was sort of, if I'm not mistaken, one of the first times we as an audience were seeing the audience in the trailer, where like in the movie theaters, it would be night visioned out, right? And you would sort of have the cameras not on the screen, but on the audience, sort of like them freaking out. And whether those were like staged actors or not, I think that's irrelevant, but it sort of provoked like a real feeling in people like, oh wow, maybe I should go check this out for myself. And I thought that was really cool.
Well, now you enter into the age of streaming, and it like changes the game because you can do so much. I was scrolling on Shutter yesterday, and like just looking at like all of like the different like countries and subgenres that you can go through, and joining them December 5th will be Mr. Creep, which is your latest found footage
Oh,
project.
nice.
Oh, is that
I
coming
didn't
to
know
Shutter?
that. Very
It is
cool.
not coming to Shutter. I used
Oh.
Shutter as an example. You have to it's available on VOD, and tell
It
us
would
a
be
little
a
bit
lot
about
cooler if it did.
yeah, tell us a little bit about Mr. Creep.
Okay, Mr. Creep is about a group of college kids that are working on a project where they have to investigate this sort of cold case local legend, if you will, about a serial killer that allegedly killed roughly 200 individuals over a certain span of years. And when they had caught him and he had died, um, he sort of exposed some of this information saying that God has basically told him to do this, and if he does, then uh he'll turn into God. And so there is this investigation into a lot of these anomalies that sort of center around Mr. Creep, because in one realm we're talking about him being dead, and another we sort of like get to see a glimpse of like what Mr. Creep is like before he died, And so I guess that's sort of the best way I can describe it, because a lot of these found footage movies is involves kind of like exploring these like do not go to places. And so in Mr. Creep we visit a abandoned prison and sort of explore that, and that sort of becomes like our realization that we're getting, as a group, we're getting like way in over our heads.
Yeah, I know this one, as we're recording, is just kind of finished going through the festival circuit, being shown all over the place, and got a lot of notoriety and awards for it. So it's one that if you're a found footage fan, we got the opportunity to review it, which is why we're here today. So, and it's go ahead.
I was gonna say what's really interesting about this one is that I feel like this is also really timely just to kind of throw in there that if you guys are on the fence or like need a reason to check this movie out, at the center of it, this local legend happens to be about a killer clown. I won't spoil too much about it, but I feel like coming off of the heels of Terrifier 2 and all the hype of surrounding that movie, this is another reason to kind of pick up this one. I think that this movie is really interesting because it's a found footage genre, but it also kind of blends together like the supernatural aspect with a little bit of like slasher aspects as well.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I really enjoyed. So I feel like from what I have read and seen, and the credits y'all been given for the movie, it was well deserved.
Oh, thank you very much. I love working with Isaac Rodriguez and the No Sleep film team. Right when we jumped into Mr. Creep, I had just wrapped working on his previous film, A Town Full of Ghosts, where I did do a little bit of voice work on that as well. But I had edited that movie with Isaac, and that's sort of how he and I became acquainted.
So you're primarily voice work for Mr. Creep, like having this passion and love for something of the found footage genre. How does it feel like stepping on like the opposite side of the microphone
Mm.
for something that primarily takes a lot of attention on screen?
Certainly. Even though I have more behind the scenes experience, it was fairly easy for me to sort of like make these transitions in the last few films that I worked on, because initially when I was like growing up in middle school and high school, I was always in the theater program and always doing a musical with as an ensemble, or just kind of getting weird on stage. Anybody who's done theater knows that everybody in theater is kind of weird, but in a really cool way. So it's just,
Yeah.
hell yeah. So with that being said, like, it's just like, if the opportunity arises, for me to like work on something more intimately, like in front of camera, I'm always like, hey, put me in, coach. I would love to do that. But I learned from making one of actually my first found footage film, Camping Fun. I sort of learned how what I do and what I don't want to do with sort of that back and forth between, let's say directing and acting. What I learned from, making that film, which I'm very proud of, because it certainly opened a lot of like different avenues for me. But I learned that I'm sort of like I'm sort of like minimizing the amount of potential that this film could have by sort of wearing both hats as an actor and director. So I always think like I don't want to do both at the same time for the same film. Maybe if I direct one, I would just solely direct it. Or, if I was asked to act in something, then, there's kind of no way in hell that I would direct it as well, just because I know how much kind of thought process and energy and responsibility kind of goes into over like project management and overseeing, the whole production.
You have any other upcoming projects that you have that may be releasing soon or that you're working on that you could talk about?
Uh, Unfortunately, not much that I can talk about, but I can say a little bit about the next one. There is a sequel to another found footage film that came out in 2020, and we're going to be doing an anthology, sort of based on the internet life and the screen life, and just sort of like internet horror, if you will. And so this is something I've been working on for about 2 years, where they're gonna have like 8 people or 7 or 8 people sort of like direct a segment, sort of like how VHS would do, or just kind of like these other anthologies, sort of having like an ensemble of directors, if you will. And I spent 2 years working on my story, and luckily I got connected with this team that I certainly have like always looked up to, and so I'm really excited. I'm also a little bit nervous, but more so excited to just kind of take this opportunity and give it all that I got with making something spooky. And I can't really like say, much else other than kind of coming off of the Barbados Project, which was a feature film I co-directed that came out this year. We sort of took that sci-fi film and made with it like a kaiju style creature feature. And so one thing I've always been compelled to sort of dive into is the supernatural. And so I'm definitely hoping to sort of keep going with that, with some of my upcoming work.
Yeah, I got the opportunity to see Barbados Project. Actually, you gave me the opportunity to see the Barbados Project.
It's a trip. It's on Tubi, by the way. Anybody can see it. But
Oh, it is? Okay. It's yeah, it almost plays out something like a oh, Cloverfield, something like that.
oh,
Is
nice.
kind of how it plays out, the way it works.
Well, I love Cloverfield, and it's definitely not a Clover. Don't go into it thinking you're watching Cloverfield, because
Yeah.
we were a very small crew, a very like low budget production. A lot of just sort of like the bells and whistles that we added to the movie were what was like a heavily post-production type of film. It's definitely not for everyone, but I think it's self-aware enough to sort of kind of let you have fun with it if you want to have fun with it.
Yeah, I say that as it's that kaiju stomping through a city, but you're seeing it through the eyes of a camera of people looking for it, kind of thing,
Yeah.
and their interactions as it's happening. So
You know,
it
and
was
in our
interesting.
and in our credit sequence too, we went a little like unorthodox with how we kind of displayed our credits, where we just sort of threw in, a lot of people would do like deleted scenes, if and on a DVD or something like that. And for our credit sequence, we sort of went a little nuts with it and just created a whole lore behind this sort of myth of whether or not monsters are roaming throughout the island of Barbados while the government's trying to cover it up.
Yeah, it was
Nice.
almost like an extra like 5 or 10 minutes of like little news clips and news footage and things like that.
Yeah, and I think we had talked a little bit before that you're acquainted with some of my friends over at the Overlook Hour podcast, and the same guys who run the Unnamed Footage Festival, which is a completely like found footage. They've only programmed sort of found footage, film shot in the found footage perspective, and I got a chance to work closely with them on the film, so we sort of did this meta sort of podcast piece where somebody's mailing them in footage. A lot of the ways this is sort of how Japanese horror cinema goes, where like they get delivered footage and an investigative team sort of has to like dive deep into it. That's a lot how a lot of the narratives start in J horror. So with me being really inspired by that, I sort of called up my friends and I said, hey, I'm just going to send you a lot of footage, basically a lot of footage of these monsters and these creatures and dinosaurs and, all these things that we didn't get a chance to put in, and, still find a way to kind of put it in by working in this, like somebody mailed us in this footage and we're about to take a look at it.
I'm
Nice.
I'm pretty sure one of those scenes had some monsters from Diablo.
We
Am I
do have a
wrong?
rock. We have a rock monster too.
The Rock Monster. I'm trying to think which one that was. It's an interesting movie, and you said it's on Tubi now.
Yes, it's on Tubi and Plex TV
Okay,
and POV horror as well.
okay, yeah, and the unnamed film festival is something that if you're a fan of the genre, even if you just get to do, I know the last 2 years they've done a digital version of it. Last year they had another in person version as well. But it's something that even if you do it once, it's worth it because you don't know what you're getting yourself into.
Oh,
Because
yeah, you're
the,
so right, because you're right. This last year was an in-person event, and I actually flew out for it because they premiered my spontaneous human combustion film, where basically I go on a Zoom call with my friend, and then by the end of the call, I burn in the flames. Uh,
Nice.
and
wait, what's the name of that?
it's called SHC Freak Accident.
I've come across that somewhere. I haven't
Oh,
seen
nice.
it, but I've seen it mentioned and seen screenshots of like legs on the edge of a chair with a pile of ash talking about a found footage that's about spontaneous combustion.
Yeah, and speaking of films that kind of lie heavily in post production, this was another one where it's a 2 minute film. It took us, my friend and I, literally one night to plan it, one night to shoot it, and then like 3 months to edit it, because there's a lot of moving pieces, and I also have maybe 30 versions of the film as well, like with different graphical user interfaces, just things that like I got very uh, like graphics heavy with making it, translating it into screen life, that I just sort of never knew what I wanted until I would basically, like, for every version, just instead of like add tweaks or take things out, which is, you know, what a normal sane person would do. I would just start from the beginning again and just kind of like discipline myself to say, hey, you know, just start over. It's only a 2-minute film. Like, you're not like really wasting like that much time by, you know, by resetting the clock, because sometimes you know, you're trying to put puzzle pieces together that just don't fit, and it takes actually like a lot longer sometimes if you don't realize that. So I also had a lot of help on the in sort of a lot of like a lot of directors and filmmakers that sort of really gave me some good advice, like Adrian Tofi from Be My Cat, and Ricky Umberger from The Fear Footage, Dutch Marriage from Horn the High Desert, Isaac Rodriguez, and Antoine Lee from Followed. Like a lot of those guys sort of really helped shape this film together with me.
Well, nice. You guys check out the Barbados Project now on Tubi. You guys can check out Mr. Creep when it hits VOD everywhere beginning December 5th. Thomas, where can people follow you online?
You can follow me on Letterboxd at the Movie Archive. I'm also on Instagram at the Movie Archive as well, and I occasionally get on Twitter at Camping Fun Movie, which hopefully one day I am planning to sort of take that short film thesis of mine and not necessarily make it into a feature, but I do have plans to sort of take that universe and sort of expand it into something more full length.
Nice. Well, you guys can check out those links as well as all of our social links in the descriptions wherever you guys are currently watching this, and make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button. Have a good night.